Christopher Gist has made his name exploring the wilds of North America for England's growing colonial empire. But in 1753, he faces the greatest challenge of his life, guiding a young major on a perilous mission and returning him safely down the icy Allegheny River. Suddenly, Gist's mission becomes not only a matter of life and death, but one that could determine the course of history. Because this isn't just any man. This is George Washington. Christopher Gist is one of the greatest explorers and scouts of the colonial era, but his importance to American history is often overlooked.
Gist was a remarkable surveyor, scout, frontiersman, and explorer whose detailed records, published long after his death, offered a vivid and comprehensive account of frontier life.
He is really the original frontiersman, going into these Western territories long before any of the people we think of as frontiersmen.
Gist is, in many ways, the embodiment of what we tend to think of as the frontier hero.
In the wilderness of North Carolina's remote Yadkin River Valley, Christopher Gist is a man in his element. Despite his ease at navigating the wilderness, Gist is not born to the frontier.
Unlike many of his much younger contemporaries, Gist was born in one of the largest, most well-developed cities in the American colonies, the city of Baltimore.
Gist amassed a fortune and lost it all when a warehouse storing all his goods burned down. Seeking a fresh start, he moves his family to the North Carolina frontier.
Well, moving to the frontier was not a simple proposition at this time. You literally have to find a new piece of land and start to hack a life out of the wilderness. So it had to be a huge adjustment for the family.
Gist quickly establishes himself as a trader,
Sirs?
dealing with the Cherokee, Catawba, and other local tribes.
Blankets I bring you are England's finest. Come, feel. Come winter, they will keep you warm as you sleep. Or it can be made into a fine coat for the hunt.
Gist definitely built up a reputation of being one of the white European settlers that different Indian groups could trust.
He becomes a kind of respected intermediary. This is yet another skill that will serve him well in the latter stages of his career when he's called upon to lead less experienced men into the wilderness.
Gist is soon offered an opportunity that could change his fortunes overnight: to explore and survey the Ohio Territory, an expanse of land west of the Appalachian Mountains.
The Ohio Territory comprised all of modern-day Ohio, as well as parts of Indiana, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia.
As the cities on the East Coast grow more crowded, colonists are looking to the wide open spaces farther west.
The Ohio Company was established in 1748 to explore the Ohio River Valley and to pave the way for settlement.
You must not worry.
Gist is someone who can not only map the uncharted territory, but befriend local tribes to ensure the settlers' safety.
And Gist becomes, in many ways, the perfect candidate. He also has the experience dealing and negotiating with Indians through his trading ventures so that he can approach them sensitively.
The journey will not be an easy one, but Gist sees an opportunity to create a better future for his family and for his country. Working his way across rough, mountainous terrain, it doesn't take long for Gist to realize the daunting task he's taken on.
When Gist comes over the mountain, that's a pretty rugged landscape. There's a lot of hills. The ravines are extremely sharp and deep.
But largely, he's on his own here, trying to get over the mountains and survive.
Nearly a month into his journey, Gist finally descends into the Ohio River Valley.
When Christopher Gist arrives at the forks of the Ohio, it's entirely wilderness. He sees the potential of where two major rivers come together to form this great Ohio River.
Convinced the area would be ideal for settlements, Gist knows he must be cautious as he takes measurements.
Most of the native groups that occupy the Ohio Territory, they have a long experience with being pushed out of their ancestral lands. And surveyors like Christopher Gist are the first sign that that's going to happen.
Indians actually referred to the compass as the land stealer. Gist had to be far more cautious about his behavior when he was in Indian country.
The area Gist is scouted is not far from an important Native American settlement known as Logstown.
Logstown was one of the most politically significant Indian colonies in western Pennsylvania. It was a linguistically and culturally diverse community.
Of course, there were Native American dwellings, but there were also log cabin dwellings built in the French style.
Gist is looking forward to resting himself and his horses, but he also needs to begin reaching out to Native leaders.
Good morrow. Pray pardon, does any man speak English?
What is your business here?
So the people of Logstown are used to seeing strangers, but most strangers say why they're there, and Christopher Gist doesn't.
He has nothing to barter with. That immediately raises some suspicion among the Lenapes, because if he's not a trader, then why is he here?
What is your business here?
I am simply looking for a place to rest. I have had a long journey. No, I come in peace. I'm a friend. Chief Kakawacheki lives here. May I speak to him?
We have heard what you have to say. You must leave this place. Now!
If Gist doesn't make the right move now, his mission could end here, in blood. Explorer Christopher Gist is on a mission to survey the Ohio Territory for settlement.
You must leave this place. Now!
But in the Native American community of Logstown, that mission has taken a potentially deadly turn.
I come in peace. I'm a friend.
Gist was in a truly desperate situation. So to get out of it, he basically had to tell a lie.
George Crowan. He is a friend. He will vouch for my good name.
George Crowan was a fur trader. He comes to know, respect, and befriend many American Indian tribes.
he invoked the name of George Crowan as a way of kind of claiming his friendship and almost claiming his protection.
Crowan is a good man. If he is your friend, you may stay.
Welcomed into Logstown, Gist stays overnight, departing the next morning to continue his expedition for the Ohio Company. Over several months, Gist surveys and maps the uncharted Ohio territory. Always wary of further encounters with hostile tribes.
Gist is informed that there is a French allied hunting party directly in his path, essentially. And he's told in no uncertain terms that if they capture him, he's very likely to be killed.
For a solo traveler, gunshots in the distance are a bad omen.
He knows immediately that this is not a white man's gun. Native people always loaded light. They had to preserve lead, and they had to preserve most especially powder.
Then he saw the traps that they had set. And then he knew this wasn't a situation where he wanted to hang about.
If discovered, Gist will become the hunting party's next prey. Gist knows that one sound could mean his death.
But he's savvy enough, knowledgeable enough to hide and conceal signs of his presence. Successfully complete his mission and withdraw without falling into their hands.
After more than 7 months away, Gist has completed his survey for the Ohio Company and finally makes his way back home. But he realizes immediately that something isn't right.
His immediate thought, where's my family? What happened? It must have been gut-wrenching.
Fearing the worst, Gist sets off in search of news about the whereabouts or fate of his family.
He goes out and he hears that there'd been an Indian attack. 5 people were killed.
When you lived on the frontier back then, you couldn't help but think the worst. So I'm sure that's the first thought that went through his mind, is that his family had been killed.
Gist gets word that his family may have escaped to Roanoke, Virginia. He can only ride north, hoping that the rumor is true.
They'd been displaced because of Indian raiding. As it turned out, his family had actually managed to get away safely.
Gist's first expedition ends with a joyful reunion, but he will soon be called to lead a mission that could determine the fate of the British colonies. With his family safe, Gist returns to present his findings to his employers at the Ohio Company.
It really just provides them with a wealth of information about the territory, the regions, the position of Indian villages. It's really everything that the Ohio Company could have hoped for.
Off the strength of that success, Gist is hired to lead an urgent diplomatic mission into the Ohio Territory. His crucial charge is a 21-year-old major in the Virginia militia, George Washington.
When we think of George Washington, this is the George Washington we think of. The George Washington that accompanies Christopher Gist into western Pennsylvania is one who's younger and more impulsive, prideful, a little narcissistic.
Gist will lead Washington's expedition into disputed frontier territory.
Both the British and the French have legal claims to the land in the Ohio River Valley. The French, meanwhile, have begun to establish a series of forts.
The Virginia governor who claimed this territory sought and received approval from the Crown to demand that the French vacate, and if they didn't, he also had approval to drive them out by force of arms.
Major, there's a creek up ahead. We should stop and water the horses. This is a long climb till we make camp.
I agree. I can use a drink myself.
Washington's mission is both a dangerous and a delicate one: to deliver a message to the French commander at Fort Le Boeuf demanding their retreat from British land.
Dinwiddie, as a governor, has to send someone willing to make this dangerous 500-mile trek through the wilderness. But at the same time, there's a very real possibility that the individual you send is not coming back.
"2 days to Logstown. I had hoped we'd be further along.
In this weather, on this terrain, we are making good progress.
Yes. But my orders from the governor were clear. Obtain a reply with great haste.
I understand. But if we push too hard now, the horses may fail on the return.
Sending a 21-year-old into the wilderness is not a recipe for success at this time, especially one with very little practical experience in the woods like George Washington.
With so much riding on his mission, Gist hopes to reach Fort Le Boeuf as quickly as possible. But the weather soon brings the mission to a halt.
It is not passable.
That little creek?
The rains have had their way with it. Too deep to walk the horses across.
Washington's very impatient. It was very heavily pressed upon him to move with all due dispatch to get this mission accomplished as quickly as possible.
We'll build a raft and ferry everything across tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow?
Sorry, we have no choice.
I have been riding since I could walk, and I have crossed countless creeks and rivers.
Major, I do not doubt your horsemanship. But if a pack horse drowns, it will only delay our progress further.
George Washington isn't a man who takes no for an answer.
But to be certain, I shall see how deep it is.
Major, no.
But his overconfidence could spell his doom. Explorer Christopher Gist is guiding a young George Washington to a crucial meeting. But Washington is endangering the mission and his own life with his impulsiveness.
Major, no. Major!
Gist?
Major! I have crossed this creek many times. I have never seen it this high. Our pack horses will drown.
Christopher Gist, he was the perfect person to pair up with a 21-year-old, naive, inexperienced George Washington.
Christopher Gist comes from a similar class, so he's somebody that Washington will listen to.
Major, I understand your impatience, but the wilderness follows its own rhythms. No one man's desire can interfere with it. I have spent my life learning to work with it.
but he's also somebody who is going to have a lot of patience with this hot-headed, hard-headed 21-year-old military officer who is determined to prove himself in this situation. Washington needs a steadying hand, and he finds that in Christopher Gist.
After a grueling 5-day journey, they finally arrive at Fort Le Boeuf, where Washington delivers his message.
George Washington had to deliver an ultimatum to the French. This is our property. You are not allowed to be here. You must vacate your forts and go away.
But the French are slow in responding.
They're stalling. And Washington had to be well aware that the answer is going to be no, we're not leaving. And so he's eager to just get on with it.
Still no word. At this point, it's simply gamesmanship. He's willfully trying to delay us.
From what I have seen, his answer should be clear. And the number of canoes I counted is astounding.
And his arsenal is equally as impressive. Come spring, there will be nothing to stop him from using the river to flood this region with troops and seize control. I must get back to Williamsburg as soon as possible. So that the king may have time to mobilize a proper defense.
Aye.
In those few days, Washington's been going around the fort, essentially spying on what the French have going there.
He's been able, along with Gist, to make some notations on the size of the fort, the relative strength of the bastions, right down to counting how many boats they have available to go down the river in the spring.
The French commander's response is unequivocal. They will not retreat.
That is effectively a declaration of war. It's basically saying, if you want to get rid of us, you're going to have to send troops to do so.
There's no time to waste in delivering the message to the governor of Virginia. But before they can even leave, the mission is dealt a setback.
Major, we have a problem. Pack horses are still too weak. It'll take all we can do to keep them alive for the journey home.
We absolutely must.
The burden on the horses will have to be lightened, of both supplies and riders.
Washington doesn't like this answer. This is where his inexperience starts to come on.
Very well then. Let us waste no more time.
With their horses weakened, proceeding on foot will add precious days to the journey, and the weather is only getting worse.
This is when the weather really gets nasty. This is December. These Arctic storms blow in.
The cold temperatures are making it very difficult to find forage for the animals, and horses need to eat considerable amounts in order to maintain their strength.
Major, we can stop here and make camp. Trees offer shelter from the wind. There's a stream nearby to water the horses.
It becomes a very dangerous situation, but Washington doesn't want to hear that.
Grab an axe. We'll chop some wood. We'll get a fire started. Major.
They're not moving fast enough for Washington. His age and inexperience are beginning to show, and his patience finally bubbles over.
Major, perhaps you did not hear me. We are stopping to make camp.
I heard you quite clearly, Mr. Gist. What I desire is to deliver this letter to Governor Dinwiddie with great haste. A task that you and I both know is impossible at our current pace.
Major, I must insist the horses are spent.
Mr. Gist, I have followed your good advices at every turn in this journey. I have learned much from you. But now I must insist that you follow my orders. You and I are to continue on our own by the most direct route possible.
So this is a pivotal moment. Washington says, why don't we leave the horses and walk? Let's go by compass bearing.
Going off known trails in these conditions is not something that you are accustomed to.
and I shall become so. The colony's fate hangs in the balance, and crisis demands actions. Ensign!
Now, at a crucial moment in their perilous expedition, the untried young major is pulling rank.
Ensign!
Returning from a diplomatic mission across treacherous wilderness, Major George Washington and frontiersman Christopher Gist are at odds over Washington's insistence to continue their journey alone and on foot.
His horses are weak. They're not moving fast enough for Washington. He's not patient, but Christopher Gist understands that George Washington is making a terrible decision with this order. But he is the commanding officer, so Gist does oblige. Deep down, however, he knows this is a perilous mistake.
Washington has made up his mind, and Gist has no choice but to go with him. Leaving the pack horses behind, Gist and Washington will have to walk nearly 150 miles.
They had to pare down to an absolute minimum, put on what they called Indian dress that were faster, lighter, more maneuverable.
This also is risky because if one of them becomes injured, they're entirely dependent on the other. There's no larger group to help them. There's no horse to carry them.
After covering 18 miles in one day, Washington, unaccustomed to traveling in the wilderness, is falling behind.
Mr. Gist, we have been walking since well before first light. Perhaps,
Major,
we
cannot waste the daylight.
So Washington very quickly starts to realize traveling all day by foot with your provisions on your back through sub-freezing temperatures is a lot more maybe than he bargained for. And Washington now becomes the one who's slowing them down.
There is a friendly Indian village, not far. Perhaps we can rest there briefly.
Ah, that's a relief. What village?
Murdering Town. Come.
They come across this Indian village, which is called Murdering Town. And it's like, well, that's a bad omen.
Murdering Town is the colonists' name for a small cluster of Lenape villages near Logstown.
They get a small stroke of good fortune near a small settlement called Murdering Town. You know, maybe one of the most ominously named Indian villages ever. There's one Indian who offers to provide them services as a guide.
Major, where we be headed, there be an absence of reason. Only instinct and survival rule there. You must listen to me.
You seek a guide?
It's a generous offer, but we have no need of your services.
What are you doing, Mr. Gist? Our prayers have been answered. Sir, you will eat like kings, and I will carry the Major's pack.
Do as you promised, and you'll be well compensated for your efforts.
Major. Follow me.
You must have faith, Mr. Gist. Faith.
Washington seemed to be glad of this offer of support. Gist was far more suspicious, and he was far more wary of this offer of help. And it turned out with very good cause.
They follow their Lenape guide for hours. But even as Washington tires, Gist has bigger concerns.
Gist became increasingly suspicious because it seemed to him that they were heading in the wrong direction, that they were being led astray.
Friend, it is nightfall. We must stop and make camp.
The Ottawa roam these woods hunting for scalps. We must head for my lodge. It is safe there.
How much further?
Just ahead, only as far as the sound of a gunshot.
Well, they keep walking and the lodge doesn't show up. And so Gist starts suspecting that this is a trap.
Something is amiss. We've been walking north for 3 miles.
North? How would he be taking us north?
I do not know, but I most assuredly intend to find out.
And it's good, perhaps, that their radar started to become a little bit aware now, because things were going to get progressively worse very quickly.
Are you shot? No, are you?
He missed, but had that bullet hit 10 inches in either direction, we all have different passports right now.
Gist and Washington's guide has turned on them, and he seems intent on finishing them off.
How would he be taking us north?
I do not know, but I most assuredly intend to find out.
On a grueling trek across the wilderness, Christopher Gist and George Washington face an unprovoked attack from their native guide.
Are you shot?
No, are you?
Gist goes after the Indian, and he's ready to kill him.
Don't shoot! I was firing at a deer that flashed from the trees.
Do you take me for a fool? You took dead aim!
Please, don't!
Gist, no! Perhaps he tells the truth. The moonlight plays tricks on the eyes.
A man loads a musket ball for one target, another man.
Washington had a certain code of honor, a code of behavior, which didn't really sanction the killing of someone who was at your mercy.
We'll take him prisoner then.
And do what? Drag him all the way to Williamsburg?
Now, this puts Gist in a pretty difficult situation here. How do we resolve this? This guy just tried to kill us, but you want to let him go?
Gist has a fateful choice to make. Do as Washington says and let the man go, or follow his own instincts and kill him.
You are lucky I am not alone. Major, wait here. Now.
Gist spares the guide's life, disarming and releasing him into the woods, but he remains wary of another ambush.
Gist.
Major, he is gone. I will wager my pay he will be back with reinforcements. We must start walking. Now.
And they're able to successfully push through with no rest over several days and reach the west bank of the Allegheny River, where they're presented with yet another challenge.
My hands be frostbitten, yet the river flows.
It's been so cold, they expect the Allegheny to be frozen across solid, and they can just walk across the ice. But when they get there, it's not.
Swimming the river was essentially not an option. Hypothermia would have set in, they would have perished.
The only way to cross the river is to build a raft, but their tools are limited.
Thanks to Major Washington's insistence, they've left the good equipment behind. They have only with them one little hatchet.
Constructing a raft from logs took them a whole day. So it was sunset before they could start rafting their way across the river.
Using poles made from branches, Gist and Washington set out into the Allegheny River. But crossing the river quickly proves difficult as their makeshift raft is caught up in the treacherous downstream current.
The problem was this freezing cold river running very swiftly.
And the river at this stage was choked with fast-moving ice flows.
Washington has never been in situations like this. He's not understanding the power of the river and of the cold and the forces out here.
Major Washington!
When the ice floe connected with his setting pole, the impact was enough to knock him off balance.
Next thing he knows, he's in 10 feet of freezing water.
Hit my head! Major Washington!
Gist pulls Washington from the icy river, saving his life. But the danger isn't over. The raft is being swept downriver. And with their poles washed away, they have no way to control it.
There!
Fortunately, there was a small island exposed in the middle of the river.
They've escaped the freezing river, but now they're stranded, and the temperature is dropping.
George Washington is soaked from head to toe. He could probably barely stand up.
The future father of the country is in fact in danger of freezing to death.
Gist is not that much better. His toes and fingers are probably frostbitten, and so they need to find some way to survive through the night.
Their hands are frozen, almost useless at that point. Gist tries to start a fire using flint and steel. It's the classic way, but to no avail. His fingers just aren't working the way he needs them to.
And George Washington will die if they don't get a fire going fast.
After a disastrous mishap on the icy Allegheny River, Major George Washington and frontiersman Christopher Gist are in danger of freezing to death.
For George Washington and Christopher Gist, a fire at that moment was their #1 priority. And if that fire doesn't get started, you can imagine how history changes.
With flint and steel failing, Gist's last hope is, literally, a shot in the dark.
When he's not able to start a fire the traditional way, he resorts to an old frontier trick, using his musket by putting a piece of cloth into the firing pan, so that when you fired the gun, you would get a spark that, instead of igniting the gunpowder, would ignite the cloth, and in turn, boom, fire.
He suffered mightily with his frozen fingers to get this fire going to save George Washington. But they got a good fire going, and they managed to survive the night.
We should get some sleep. Need to build a new raft in the morning.
Without the fire, it's likely that Washington probably would have died of hypothermia.
I think this is the moment that really cemented their friendship, at least for Washington, because this man saved my life, risking his life.
The next morning, Gist awakens to a welcome sight.
They they saw that the river had frozen across to the far side. And suddenly they realized they were saved.
I should think that I was dreaming.
If you are, do not open your eyes until we are safely across.
They were able to walk off the island, going straight across it. That was one bit of luck they had.
2 months after setting out on their journey, Gist and Washington finally make it back, exhausted but alive.
If all goes well, I should make it to Williamsburg in 10 days' time.
Perhaps fewer. 4 legs will serve you better than 2.
Indeed.
Here they separate, Gist to return to his family, and Washington to deliver the message to the governor in Williamsburg.
I shall be informing Governor Dinwiddie of your exemplary work on his behalf. England owes you a great debt.
It's an honor, Major.
I, however, owe you an even greater one. My very life. I shall never forget what you have done.
Washington, of course, parting ways with the man who was literally responsible for keeping him alive on multiple occasions.
You should ever need me. I'll always be at your service.
I suspect that day may be sooner than you think.
The hardships that Washington encountered in company with Christopher Gist were a kind of a definitive moment in his life, because by overcoming them, it gave him a sense of what he could achieve.
He may not know it yet, but Christopher Gist has played a crucial role in American history, and it won't be his last.
Christopher Gist really embodied the expansion of colonial America. It's really, in many ways, the point of a spear of westward expansion into the Ohio River Valley.
His time with Washington overshadows so much of who Gist was. But Gist went into the unknown in a way that very few people had done in that era.
Gist is the first person to describe the Ohio Territory for British colonists in North America. And these descriptions and surveys are a really critical part of convincing people to move west.
While his name may not resonate like Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett, it should. He serves as a doorway to open the region for almost everyone else who comes after him.